Breaking news. That's a terrible attempt at, ripping off a fucking college football podcast. Hello, it is MLB Pro today. I am fucking exhausted and essentially sick. But the change has been officially announced as the Atlanta Braves have hired a new general manager, Jonathan Hodges, one of the original GMs of the MLB Pro universe, I believe around since 2012. Lifelong, real-life Brave fan, takes over a club that he has had his eyes on joining in this league since the beginning, actually, I believe. Takes over a club coming off of its third straight postseason appearance, and a club with its first 100-win season, because they won 101 games in 2016. In fact, the most wins they've ever had in a season in 2023, with a fairly loaded roster, very high payroll, but questions to be answered for sure. It is not a walk-in, turn the key, sit back and collect your paychecks kind of a gig. There are a ton of questions to be answered about the Braves' current status and future status. So I thought it might be interesting to take a look back at the person put in charge of this team, answer some questions about where they might be going, and look at what questions remain for some other unoccupied teams, or just, I don't know, we'll see what we get to. Let's start with Jonathan Hodges, who he is. Jonathan Hodges is entering his third team in 3 years. He managed the Chicago White Sox from 2012 to 2021, or 2022, right? 2023 was his first year away. Over that time frame, the White Sox had 2 winning seasons. In 2015, they won 83 games, went 83-79, and finished third in the American League Central. They would not make the postseason until 2020, when the team won 97 games, a spectacular season in Chicago. They hit the ball well, they pitched really well. A massive fall-off right afterwards, though. I don't have the story of exactly how this happened. I guess I could get it real quick. So, yeah, let me get it real fast. Okay, I'm glad I did all that off air. And again, apologize for the back and forth. I paused and I was recording, or I was looking at shit for 30 minutes. The White Sox went nuts in 2020. This is essentially what happened. The amount of players they acquired is just insane. I'm not even sure I got through all of them, if I'm being honest, but I think I did. Essentially what you were looking at was the second full year of Roberto Torres, where he just dominated. I remember him that year. I remember trying to acquire him hard from the White Sox for a very long time. You then had the addition of, and I will try to keep this as brief as possible, Lance Ray in the offseason in a trade with the Reds. He played a ton of games in the outfield and at DH, but he hit 29 home runs that year. In addition to Josh Johnson as a starting pitcher, you had the addition of Dwight Smith Jr., who played 132 games for them as well, hit 283. He wasn't spectacular. He drove in 50 runs. He was all right. They also picked up David Chester and Nobuhisa Koyama in the middle of the season, essentially for Esteban Hernandez and some spare parts. Those two guys combined for about 59 home runs. You had a monster year from Billy Hamilton. It was a lot of players they acquired on the offensive end, coupled with a ton of people that they acquired for the bullpen, right? So you already talked about Josh Johnson, who was pretty good that year. He was 12-6. I don't know how many of those were for them and how many were for somebody else. You had Bill Black pitching very well. Kyle Cody pitched all right that year out of the pen. Some of the names here, I didn't write down the names they acquired for the pen, but there was like 7 or 8 trades where they went out and grabbed pitchers for their bullpen. So the White Sox won in 2020 on the back of a ton of trades that hit very well and a focus on the bullpen. Now, I don't, for the life of me, remember how that postseason went. I know it didn't go great, but I can't seem to pull up Hodges' postseason record. At least not here, I can't. So, anyway, 2020 was the year that the White Sox made the postseason. They came out of the gates really slow in 2021. I think it was like April 18th or something like that I saw. They made their first kind of like, hey, this isn't working out trade. They swapped big bats with the Yankees. And then about a month later, on the 9th, they made a couple of deals back to back where they started shipping off veterans, and the White Sox essentially packed it in for 2021. It's been that way ever since, right? And so we see a shift as Hodges looks for a change to leave his team, and he jumps ship to the National League. And this is the part where I need further clarification. I honestly don't remember if Hodges has run the Pirates for 2 seasons or 1. So let me find out. Okay, it was 2022. It was early, like late 2022, right? Like it could have been a spring training. It could have been post the season starting. I honestly don't know. But I know essentially what happened was the White Sox owner the Pirates GM at the time, Greg, changed and took over the White Sox, and the White Sox GM, Jonathan, came and took over Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh had been a very bad franchise for years. They were good right out of the gate. The first 4 years in MLB Pro, they were flirting with 500, over it by a couple of games here and there every now and then. Really went through the downturn. I believe Greg took over late 2019, early 2020, turned that into a 500-plus team, 82 wins, got 94 wins out of them in 2021, best team in the National League, won the division for the first time and only time in their history, made a decent run in the postseason, did not win anything, obviously. And then the managerial shift occurred. There were some changes made. I won't bore us all with the trades, although it's probably important to understand like the history of what's going on. There were some trades made by Hodges as he came over and took over the Pirates. So it looks like he took over between April and May, as there's a trade from Greg on April 8th, and then there's some trades from Hodges starting on the 22nd. I mean, really, this whole thing boils down to, like, it was a full gutting of the team as Hodges came and took over, starting with a 4-player deal that sent Jared Stevens, Melvin Garner, Max Jacobson, and a player named Rich Marmero, who I cannot believe has never made the majors. This dude looks like the best pitcher who's ever lived. I think he finally made it last year and did not pitch super well for Chicago. For Jonathan India and Richard Dean, Javier Mejia. I mean, overall, like a downgrade for what the Pirates got back. I think even at the time, I think you would look at Jared Stevens coming off a 32 home run rookie season for the Pirates, having a little bit of a slow start after Hodges took over, but being sent off for Jonathan India, who, while he played well in Chicago, didn't really return anything in Pittsburgh. It was a bit of a confusing move from the outside looking in, and one that sparked previous Pirates manager, the GM, to lash out a little bit in terms of what was happening. The teardown would continue as you'd see Garrett Schlecht and Alec Boehm and a couple of other players that really helped this team to a 94-win season get shipped out for future pieces, including, I think, what Hodges would have considered his, like, the lynch point of his rebuild, which was getting C.J. Abrams from the Braves, which allowed him then to go out a couple of other pieces. But the point being, what you saw was a systemic teardown of what was a good team that didn't seem to be building in the way that Jonathan wanted it to build, which is fine. It's what we're supposed to do. And the Pirates had a longer vision than the runway that Hodges' tenure there would eventually give, right? I think he had some strong things going. I think he had a vision for the team, especially in a division like the National League Central, which seems to have weakened over the last couple of years. You could see the vision of what was happening. He then gets this dream job open up, and what's left is a Pirates team that has a core of C.J. Abrams, Reese Hines, Gary Matthews III, Stanford Samuels, right? Some young players there, Austin Siegler, and an aging pitching staff as he goes to Atlanta. right? And so we've kind of told the story of how he got where he got and what happened in his wake and what's left behind him. What's behind him, and again, not all his fault, but it are two 60-win teams in the White Sox and the Pirates. And he now enters a Braves team, like I said, won 104 games last year. Has a core of offense that, while expensive, could be argued is one of the best in the league. Harper stays as he renews his player option, it seems. Taylor Sparks walks out the door, which does open a huge hole at third base. Ohayashi, Bo Bichette, Jake Fromm really proved to be a hell of a first base, third base combo there. Jimmy Vega in center field had a down year, still a very good piece. They finished second in run scores in the National League, second in OBP, third in OPS, second in batting WAR, third in WOBA, second in home runs, fourth in stolen bases, second in runs against. The starting rotation has a solid anchor in a guy like Rod Swift. I think Walker Buehler is as good as number 2 as you could hope for. Beyond that, it does get a little dicey. Robinson Rivera doesn't seem to have returned to the person he was a couple of years ago. Brady Aiken's clearly a 4 or a 5. But what you do have in Atlanta is one hell of a bullpen. Nick McCulley, James Serrano, Abraham Jones, Tracy Moss, Max Fried, Yohan Duran pitched really well after coming over from Chicago. It anchors what Hodges seems to have wanted to build and seems to have built in 2021, which is a team of mashers, right? Harper only had 20 home runs, but he was hurt for the majority of the season. Dylan Carlson also suffered a little bit from some injuries, as he only started 116 games, but they did 21 home runs, much more than he was ever hitting in Oakland, so he seems to have found some pop here in Atlanta. A team full of mashers that can hit with a strong bullpen, and he's got the makings of a very good rotation. So what does Hodges have to figure out in Atlanta? Huge question. First question needs to be answered is who plays third base, and how do you solve that problem without a lot of money? There are a couple of internal options. As you look at Alec Boehm, was given the starting helm a couple of times in Atlanta, never really got back to what he was as a rookie in Pittsburgh. 30 home runs, 90 RBIs as a rookie in 2021. Struggled a little bit in Pittsburgh in the second year. Has been terrible in Atlanta over, 101 starts now. He has hit 9 home runs, struck out a ton, really struggled to hit for any kind of average. So he is a bit of a wild card that I don't know is a huge fit there, but he'll definitely get his shot. There are guys that play the third base position in the minor league system. If you want to get super in-house about it, which again you might have to do if you're Atlanta, as you look for places to do this. You've got Marvin Gruen, who for years has played third base amicably in Atlanta. For whatever reason, fell out of favor in 2023 after a really strong 2022 where he hit 286 with a 360 OBP. He didn't hit for power, which maybe is the problem that they saw in him, but hit great in AAA last year, struggled in the bigs over 57 games, but he's a solid option that if he's your number 8-9 hitter, there with playing third base, it's not the worst thing that's ever happened to you. Justin Foscue looks like an interesting one, although his defense is going to be suspect down in the minor leagues. There's not a lot of guys here that are ready. Keone Cavaco looks like he'll strike out too much. He's probably not an answer. Jake Berger, who's brought over from the Cubs last year for whatever reason, doesn't look like a major league bat. So that's problem one. I do think you have a guy like Manel Pinetra down in the minors that I really like long-term. He looks like your long-term third baseman, or maybe a first baseman, who knows. Maybe you can flip Jake Fromm over to third base and see if he can stick over there. He's a little bit better defensively than some of these other guys, and he clearly has the bat. If you can push him over, that opens it up to being able to be a first baseman, which is much easier to solve for. But that's question number one. Question two is, who is your third starter, right? Rod Swift, Walker Buehler, great 1-2. Both right-handed, which could be an issue, so it's not going to be a problem long-term if you can get some lefties. But who's number 3? If you go 4-5, Brady Aiken, Robinson, Rivera, that's not bad. But that third starter needs to be somebody exceptional if you're going to compete in a national league with the world champion Colorado Rockies, an improving Dodgers team, a Phillies team in your own division that will have full-time management this year after being abandoned and still being spectacular for the majority of 2022 or 23. A Marlins team that showed a ton of promise early on. A Mets team that, while it has struggled over the last couple of years, still has consistent ownership and management in Bruce Carson. And then a Nets national team that I can't believe finished dead last year. You've got people to compete with, I guess is the point. So those are the questions John Hodges will have to answer. I polled some people around the league. What are the thoughts? There is concern, although I have talked to John Hodges himself, and he's assured me this is not the plan. There's concern of folks thinking that he will shake the boat too much. There are pieces here that could be moved, and there's certainly pieces that are tempting to improve upon, right? If you look at people on the bench, you look at guys like Nick Madrigal, who maybe has stayed a little too long, right? There was a ton of interest in him early on. He hit well, 280 on the bench roll. Can he be moved for something more substantial, or could you move a guy, do you move guys like Bo Bichette or Millard Thomas, who have also had a ton of interest? But the concern is that Hodges has a track record of making a ton of moves, and a team that is in the position the Braves are, if a ton of moves are made, it changes the chemistry. Who knows what happens, right? Again, I don't know what the outcome here is, but I think the consensus beyond that is there's excitement that somebody like Hodges, who's been a huge part of this league for a long time, has a team he's genuinely excited to run. And people are excited to see what he does in his third full year in the National League. I think, can he put a vision that had a very clear timeline in Pittsburgh into a place in Atlanta where that timeline's accelerated, because their financials demand that they compete now, and their recent success demands that the team compete now probably as well. We'll see. I hope to talk to him or some other folks down the line, and we will talk more about the Braves, going forward. I don't have a lot else. I think there's some rumblings. I know the Orioles GM, Drew Hastings, was said to have left his post. I've heard rumors that he actually has not, and he will be sticking around in Baltimore, which would be great to see, as he's done really good things with this team. And it's back-to-back. Is it back-to-back postseason appearances? It sure is. 93 games in 2022, 91 games in 2023, so he's won 90 games plus with a team that hadn't won over 70 games since 2018. So brought some consistency to this organization, which is good to see. Glad to see he's sticking around. I've heard some other rumors of some folks that may be taking over the abandoned Pirates and some other teams that are available. So expect some more shakeups down the line. Hope to talk to everybody soon.